Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm doing all right. It's good to virtually meet you. Let's start with just generally what motivated you to transition from a background in engineering and business into venture capital, and why specifically InsurTech?
Yeah, so Florian speaking, co-founder of astorya.vc, and that's true. I've been investing for 15 years. I have an engineering background, and I think that this is related to the tech investment that I'm doing right now, because I do like technology, and I'm really fond of technology, whatever the technology, consumer goods. Obviously, technology apply to industries that need to get better in the future, and I believe that technology is one answer to build a better future. So that's where my interest for technology is coming from. I also have a commercial degree, and that's where the investment is part of my job is coming from. So at one point of my career, I had in mind to merge the two of them. So investing, the financial interest, and investing in technology, because I like, again, technology. So that's where the VC industry is coming from. And I believe that I have a very entrepreneurial mindset. That's why, by the way, I launched my own VC firm with my partner and colleague Jan. We've been running astorya.vc for 5 years now, and we do operate in the InsurTech space. That's where the let's say the random part of the story is coming, because the reality is that, again, I've been investing in tech startup for 15 years. Half of that period of time was in InsurTech. And I was very lucky to start in InsurTech at the very early days of InsurTech in Europe back in 2015, where I joined AXA Ventures, so the corporate VC arm of AXA. Again, the Fintech space was booming. InsurTech was even not a buzzword or an hashtag on social networks. So it was the very early days, but the rationale behind was, as an investor, it's always very nice to enter a new fund, because then you have a period of time to invest that money. So that was the first rationale. The second rationale was the link with fintech. A lot of innovation was happening in financial services. According to me, there were no reason this would not happen in insurance as well. And there is no better place to enjoy that change on the market than working for the number one in the world, AXA in that case. So that's where the InsurTech part is coming from. And then it was just an opportunity, considering that there is a kind of gap on the market to cover, because we are investing at seed stage, so very early. Usually we invest before where corporate can invest. They tend to invest later on when startups have many customers, are way bigger. We invest at the very beginning when the product exists. So that's where we are complementary. And we are also very complementary to fintech funds that are, or that were usually the most active in InsurTech investment, considering that InsurTech is around 10% of fintech. So long story short, they spend 10% of their time on InsurTech. We spend 100% of our time on InsurTech. That's what we are selling to our investors, which can access earlier startups and get a more exhaustive view on the market. So that's how I landed in investing in tech startup for insurance.
Yeah, no, you really got in on the ground floor of InsurTech, it sounds like. So I know that you invest in very early stage startups. What are the sort of key characteristics you look for in early stage startups before deciding to invest?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because I believe that by design, every investor has his or her own criteria to invest. And at seed stage, it's maybe more complicated because you invest very early. Again, we define our seed focus as post-product. So it means that we can even sometimes invest pre-revenues when we have a very strong conviction on the opportunity and the team. Nevertheless, even if there are few data points to consider, there is a lot to assess an opportunity. And as an investor, we usually say that we invest in a team. That's true, but there is a way to have a subjective approach to that. We try to be objective as well, and I think that This is where the link with the product exists, because first, the product says a lot about the technology. And again, we believe that the only opportunity in insurance, because this is the industry that we know, the only opportunity is to have a differentiated technology, because incumbents have many strengths, a lot of money, a lot of customer, a lot of the value of the brand, etc. But they lack technology due to talent acquisition, talent retention, etc. But so there is an opportunity to invest in tech that they will purchase in the future, either as a customer or as, let's say, a merger and acquisition scheme. So that's very important for us to have a look at the technology itself. And again, the technology says about the capacity of the founders to deliver. They say, and it says also a lot about how they understand the pain point they are trying to solve. Obviously, the company might pivot, they might change their positioning to reach the famous product market fit. So having something that customers are ready to pay for, but at least it says about how they understand the pain point and how they plan to solve it. So that's where this focus on the tech and the product itself says a lot. And the other rationale behind is that, again, we are investing only in InsurTech. We have a very strong network of insurance companies or insurance players around us in Europe. And one of our value proposition to founders is to accelerate the sales process. In insurance, it takes sometimes 18, 24 months to sell to a corporate. So if we can save 6, 9, or 12 months in the sales process, this is a huge value proposition for the founders. That's what we are trying to provide with. So again, having a product in front of us can help us assess who in our network could be the next customers. And finally, we obviously have strong conviction on market opportunities. That's based not only on the discussion we have with incumbents, because we hear what they are looking for, we hear what are their pain points, but it's also based on an exhaustive view on the InsurTech market. We have developed our own scouting tool, which helps us, let's say, track any startup in Europe in insurance innovation. And that helps us, again, spot trends before they go mainstream. And that's where we can anticipate. And again, investing in seed startup, we are investing, let's say, in trend that will be strong in 3 to 5 years. But obviously, we enter a bit before, and we work with the founder to build and strengthen these trends. So that's how we do things. Really centers around the technology, even when assessing the team. Obviously, the fit between the founder's background and the industry in which they are evolving is key. But again, the product is the core part of our assessment.
Right. So how do you identify those trends? Because you say you're investing in something that really 3 to 5 years in the future will be a trend. How do you identify those?
Yeah, so again, I think that there are two parts of our job, let's say, to spot trends. The first one is obviously having regular discussion with corporates, incumbents, and listening to the strengths that they consider they have, which are maybe opportunity where they are not ready to pay for external solutions. So maybe that's not things in which we want to invest because it will be too far from our investment to be able to sign a contract with incumbents. On the other hand, they highlight sometimes threat or limits that they have in their day-to-day business. Usually it's around technology. I think that one core point right now is around the data, around AI, for instance. That's very interesting because they are all trained to develop internal solutions, but we can see that obviously the development internally are less quick than what startup can do. Again, nothing specific, I think, to the insurance space. That's the famous innovator dilemma written 25 years ago, still accurate, that explained basically why incumbents need to rely on external innovation to really innovate. And our job, again, is to fuel this innovation. So first, we listen to incumbents to spot a gap in their initiatives. And on the other hand, we have a scouting tool with more than 5,000 startups spotted across Europe. Just to give you a rationale, that's close to 30% more startups than any other database in Europe. Again, no magic. It's just because we are tracking insurance innovations. So we know what we are looking for. We know where to look for these startups. And usually we are able to spot startups even before they raise money because we want to be the first investor. So we need to find very young and very early stage startups. And having such an exhaustive view on the market helps us monitor what's hot and what's the noise on the market. And it also helps us spot trends that are not that obvious, but that are happening too. I will give you an example. Over the last 8-10 years of InsurTech, so basically since inception of InsurTech, over half of the startups that raise money in Europe were addressing the distribution part of the value chain. So more than half of them are there. So if you read newspapers, you will see these startups, but you will miss that actually on the pricing, on the product, on the claim part of the value chain, there are also startups that are developing solutions there, that are growing, that are maybe raising less money because they have customers and they need less money. So the headlines will be less numerous on these sections on the value chain, but actually there are things happening. And our scouting tool helps us spot these trends. And even on the distribution side, we have a very granular view thanks to our own, let's say, secret sauce / algorithm, where we can spot that beyond distribution, you could have direct distribution, you could have tools for agents and brokers, and more recently, you could have embedded insurance. So even beyond the label distribution, there is a more granular way that shows that there are successive waves of innovations that are several trends to embrace. And again, embedded insurance, for instance, that's a trend that we've been, let's say, monitoring, pushing and investing in for 4 to 5 years. So even before the word embedded insurance exists, we wrote many pieces online saying, okay, look, third-party players, e-commerce, marketplaces will become a significant part of the insurance distribution. And there are startups enabling that move on the market, even before the headlines were there. Again, no magic, because we see everything, we are able to spot what matters.
So you have a very comprehensive sort of algorithm, a way of looking at all of this. How do you, you're really well positioned to answer this. How do you envision the future of InsurTech? And what technologies and business models do you think will be the most disruptive?
Yeah, that's a very enthusiastic question. And I believe it's the right moment to ask this question. Because I think that we are at the end of what we could name InsurTech 1.0, where, again, back to what I mentioned before, a lot of companies were created around the distribution part of the value chain. Most of them had a direct-to-consumer approach. And with money not anymore free, there is a challenge to raise money for these companies. Hence, we see more and more M&A deals between incumbents and this kind of digital distributors, where incumbents are acquiring not only a portfolio, but also a capacity to distribute their product online. There is an asset, there is value. The question is, how much is it worth? And that's where there might be a gap between the price and the valuation. But I guess this is another story. But again, considering that InsurTech 1.0 was mainly direct distribution to consumer with only, if I may say that, only an online distribution capacity, again, the insurance value chain is way broader than that. And I will take one example beyond claim management that needs a lot of technology to supercharge or to help humans process faster, smoother, and cheaper the claim process. We see a lot of insurance companies that are highlighting that they will work on cost effectiveness, which is another way to say cost reduction. So there is a challenge to be more effective, and that's where technology could be helpful. on the underwriting part, better understand the customer that you have in front of you, have a smoother onboarding process, get more data to better understand who your customer is. That's another challenge. And the last challenge, I believe, is key and probably more dramatic for the insurance industry is what we call new risks. New risks are basically risks that are not mandatory or covered by every insurance companies, that didn't exist or were not that significant in the past, but that are growing fast. The best example is weather damages related to climate change. And look at what is happening in the US, for instance. Over the last week, a few leading insurance companies left the Californian market because they were not able to price the risk at the right level. Yeah. Also due to regulatory challenges, for sure. But that also says something about the need to revamp the insurance experience to be able to cover this kind of risk. The other example is the cyber risk. We hear a lot of reinsurance companies saying that basically this will probably become one of their major business lines in the future. But so far, they remain very cautious because they lack data to understand that risk. So that's where, on new risk, I believe that there is maybe the most interesting opportunity for InsurTech companies, because that's where incumbents will need external players to cover this risk. Again, because you will have to spot new data sets and get sense of these data sets thanks to algorithm. And on these two sections, that's where tech startups are way more relevant because they have the capacity to attract talent. They have the capacity to keep talent on board too. And that these data, let's say, understood by algorithm will enable incumbent to carry the risk accordingly. So that's definitely for me the most exciting part of what could become an opportunity for InsurTech. That's the InsurTech 2.0. So maybe to summarize this second wave that we expect, again, more technology alongside the value chain on pricing, on claim, and maybe longer term opportunity to tackle new risks.
You answered my climate change question, because I was going to ask you about State Farm, et cetera, pulling out of California. I wanted to ask you how, in some ways, is InsurTech better prepared for climate change than traditional insurance? And how can InsurTech kind of beat the unpredictability of climate change?
That's a very challenging question. I think that that there are two ways to answer that point. So first, we see more and more startups on the, let's say, climate-related technologies, climate tech. We see that makes perfect sense. There were kind of horizontal solution, for instance, on CO2 tracking, let's say tracking any kind of activity. Then we started seeing CO2 tracking solutions specific to financial services. And now we have even CO2 tracking solutions specific to the insurance industry itself. We have invested in claims carbon in that space, tracking CO2 emissions in the claim process, starting with car claim. So that's very specific, and that's really complementary to horizontal solutions, because tracking how your employees are coming to the office, for instance, that's the kind of answer you will get through horizontal solution. But on your business line, how much CO2 emission you are generating due to your claim process, that's very industrial challenge, and that's what claims carbon can help with. So the first part of the answer is that we see more and more startups that are tracking or enabling this climate tech trend in insurance more specifically, which is also related to the DNA of insurance company. We see that they like to have an insurance-oriented solution. Because insurance players often say that insurance is very specific. So I guess this resonates with their, let's say, purchasing behavior, which is to embrace insurance specific solution. And that's where we are lucky as an investor, because again, we invest in insurance specific solutions. On the other hand, there are challenges rather on the risk itself. And that's where I would not say that InsurTech are more or better prepared than incumbents, because I really believe that it's a work to be done together. Again, if you'd like to tackle the climate change, obviously you need to have the capacity to carry the risk. And for that job, incumbents are better position than any other player, because they are bigger, they have a stronger financial position. That's how the market is structured today, and I'm not sure it will change tomorrow morning. That's for sure. On the other hand, there is a real challenge to understand these risks, because it's nice to be able to carry the risk, but if you are not able to understand and price the risk, you will not carry that risk. And that's what we see in, for instance, the cyber insurance market. I believe that the core challenge right now is to get insurance capacity. Not because insurance companies or reinsurance companies are not able with their balance sheet to cover the risk. It's just that they don't know the risk. So again, we are not doing gambling, we are doing insurance. There is no magic behind. So we need to understand and price the risk to be able to carry that risk accordingly. And that's where understanding the risk on cyber, on climate, that's where startup should be more relevant, because they don't have the legacy, they don't have the historical data. And regarding climate change, there is no historical data. Or almost, again, if you take, let's say, the life cycle of humanity, the damages are just accelerating. So the data that we have in the very recent past are more important than what was in the longer past. So there is a need to spot new data sets. There is a need to attract and keep data, AI, algorithm talents. And again, we see that example in many spaces. It's a challenge for corporate to attract and keep these talents. Again, I don't think it's specific to the insurance industry. Back to the innovator dilemma, an incumbent by design cannot attract and keep talent at the same rate and quality than a startup. So that's why data and tech people will rather work for tech startups, which will work with incumbents. But again, I think that it's because they will team up together, then they will succeed, because incumbents will lack on the data tech side, startup will lack on the insurance capacity side. And we need both of them to address climate change, for instance. And maybe the last point is that, and I find it very interesting, intellectually speaking, insurance company probably need more than any other industry to tackle these climate change risks, because they are the one paying for the damages. So they have a huge incentive to be at the forefront of the climate change fight. That's why there are some initiatives, the net zero, even if for many reasons, a lot of players left that alliance. But again, I think that due to their business, due to the fact that at the end of the day, insurance company will pay for climate change damages, they have a huge incentive to fight climate change. And we see a lot of initiative at insurance level, the stopping financing, for instance, CO2 dirty businesses, etc., etc. So I think that we will see more in the future, and that's obviously a huge opportunity.
Yeah, no, it's interesting how the InsurTech world, it kind of mirrors the fintech world in general in terms of collaboration between incumbents and the new startups. Let's pivot for 1 second. You started a retail business called Flow and You. How has being an entrepreneur yourself influenced your perspective as a VC?
I think it's highly related. So first, I started a very first company at the very first day of my career. I learned a lot from that first experience. The first one was that if I do it again, I would do it again. I would do it with a partner, and that's what I did with astorya.vc. We created together with Jan astorya.vc, and it was key to be two since day one, because we are very complementary in the way we approach things. And having an entrepreneur background, both of us, by the way, Jan does too, is really important because, again, we are investing very early. So we are not investing in KPI, we're investing in a capacity from the founders to develop a great product and find customer for that. So having this kind of DNA since day one first helps us raise money from insurance companies and investors, because they know that we have launched our fund ourselves. Again, astorya.vc is a company. Our job is to invest in startup, but that's a company. That's a startup that we launched together, and that's really important to have this DNA day one. And I think that it helped us enter deals, not because the brand was known. Again, at the very beginning of Astorya, we were not known. Right now, after 5 years on the market, we did our job quite well, and we are a name that counts in InsurTech. But on day one, you are nobody, so you need to show something to the founders. And again, having an entrepreneurial background ourselves help understand what is challenging, anticipate moves from entrepreneurs, and again, that's a pattern that you see among VCs. There are usually two kinds of pattern, either coming from financial services, pure investment, and then you invest in startups, or you launched or operated a startup yourself and you become an investor. I'm not sure that there is a right or wrong pattern, but nevertheless, if you split or have a careful look at the VC market, that's the two major patterns you see. The one, by the way, which is a bit lagging is tech people. So engineers, there is a lack of engineer in VC, even if it's changing a bit, but you see a lot of background in commercial studies and again, ex-startupper. So it helps understand the challenges. It helps have an equal view on the market. And I believe that when things are tough, entrepreneurs probably go easier to us than pure financial investors, because they know that we probably face the same challenges being investor, but being, let's say, a CEO of a company ourselves.
Right. No, it's like a fractal. It's you are yourself an entrepreneur who's investing in entrepreneurs. So you're also a mentor, Israeli InsurTech Accelerator, Plug and Play Munich. And by the way, just speaking to you now, I can see what kind of that you must be a very extremely helpful mentor. What common mistakes do you see startups making, and how can they avoid them?
Yeah, so I think that the first challenge for entrepreneurs is to believe that the market is waiting for you. That's not true. Whatever your positioning, so even if you spot something on the market, nobody is waiting for you. So that's the first point. The second point is to think that it will be easy, but I'm not sure that entrepreneurs still consider that it will be easy. Or if you hear somebody says, "Oh, it's very easy," that's not either he or she is lying, or the positioning is not the right one, because that's not true. It's really tough. It's hard working, a bit of luck, obviously, and there are a few patterns to spot on the market. And by the way, that's what I'm sharing with our portfolio company. That's what I try to share as a mentor too. Again, having been an investor for 15 years, I saw so many examples of fail and success that I will not say I know what works, because I believe that nobody knows. Otherwise, there would be a secret sauce that would be worth a lot, by the way. But at least we know pattern. We can anticipate mistake. We can anticipate things that will not go in the right direction. And on the other hand, I think that the core challenge, and that's what one of our investors told me in the very early days of astorya.vc. He said, "Look, your challenge is to move always faster. So every morning when you wake up, ask yourself how you can move faster." So I believe it's really important because, again, considering that the most challenging asset that you have is time. And that's where money is here to balance the time. So you usually invest at seed stage, or when you do a funding, it's for usually 15, 18, 24 months. So long story short, you have this time frame to deliver the next milestone. If you miss it, that's the end of the journey. So whatever can help you move faster is really nice. And that's where our 15 years of background is helpful, because if you avoid 1, 2, 3 mistakes, and if you find a shortcut because you know that there is an option to have that shortcut, or if you don't replicate what others have failed to deliver, that's where you could gain time. And if you gain time, I'm not saying that you will succeed, but you have more chances to succeed. So you need to find a shortcut to everything. And again, I believe that this is where we are the most helpful to our portfolio companies and to startups that we mentor, is to help them spot this way to accelerate and move faster. And that's also related to our investment thesis, because we see, again, being very focused on insurance innovation and insurance technology, we spot opportunities. And on the other hand, we have very clear patterns on startups that fail. And it's sometimes very impressive to see another startup raising or launching on the market on exactly the same pattern as 10 other companies that failed in the past. What is interesting, again, I'm not saying that because 10 startups in the past failed, that the next one will not succeed. I'm just saying that at least you should learn from the 10 startups that failed. And that's what we are providing to our portfolio company, saying, look, we have analyzed these 10 startups that failed in that direction. Here is what we could learn. And then we have open discussion with them, because if you only rely on your own key learnings, you will fail too. What is interesting is to have different views around the table. We provide the InsurTech views. We have insurance specialists around us, which are our investors. And then we have non-insurance players around us too, pure financial investor or pure entrepreneurs, pure product people, pure design people. So basically, people that have a different view than we have, because that's where the success could come from, having different views on the same object, which is the business and the startup opportunity.
Right. Yeah. No, I was thinking, as you were talking about that, I wanted to hear if you're allowed to talk about a specific successful investment, or, could you share a success story and like what made it stand out?
Yeah, I think that one company in which we have invested, again, we are investing very early. So I believe that the success takes time. We've been on the market for 5 years now. So we are entering the moment of the investment vehicle where we will see the first success. But I think that the example I have in mind is a startup named WeCover in Spain. They are in the embedded insurance space. When we met them, it was a while ago, they didn't have the word, because the word didn't exist. But we had a look at that company and we say, okay, look, they are on a small market, because Spain is a smaller market, let's say, than France, the UK, and Germany, though very active in InsurTech. Back at that time, 3-4 years ago, not a lot of investors outside of Spain were investing in Spain, and InsurTech in Spain was still very, very young. But we spotted these guys. They had the perfect view on the market, and without naming embedded insurance, that's what they were delivering. They had built the infrastructure, the tech infrastructure, enabling to connect insurance capacity on one side and platforms distributor on the other side in a very smooth way. So that was very exciting to see people that had exactly the same view on the opportunity than we had. And we wrote a lot about that opportunity back then, and it was a perfect match. And what was very exciting is that their background was very consistent with the opportunity. They had the perfect mix again between insurance background and tech background, tech and product background. So they were able to develop a very nice tech, but matching the requirements of insurance. And they were able to discuss with insurance players and get insurance capacity with the capacity to move as fast as a tech startup. So because in that space, that's a real challenge, not to be too insurance, because probably you will be too slow, and not being too tech or product, because you will lack the insurance aspect of the business. So they had the perfect mix. And a few years later, they keep growing, they accelerate, they have very nice figures. They have what we call a capital effectiveness, so the capacity to deliver revenues based on how much they have raised. They have raised on less than 3 million euros so far. So very small company. Nevertheless, they have very nice figures compared to all other players in that space that we can see. And again, there is no magic. They have developed the right infrastructure, and they have the right connection with the insurance market to get an unfair advantage, and it works. They have signed very big names in Spain. I have in mind, for instance, Fnac, PC Componentes. So these players are very huge player, kind of Amazon, local Amazon, if I can say that on specific product. And sometimes they win, or they won the project against incumbents. So again, a very small startup that's raised a very small ticket, managed to successfully win a partnership with this kind of big player because they had the right product. And now they are scaling outside of the Spanish market, so in France, etc., because the use case is heavily replicable. So that's an example of a success. And I believe, again, one way to, depends obviously on how you measure the success. In InsurTech 1.0, I think that the way to measure the success was a lot based on fundraising. I think that all the market has learned that it was not enough as a KPI. We are rather tracking, again, capital effectiveness, because I think that this is something that we can bring also to the insurance industry, considering that cost of acquisition is very high in insurance. If you manage to reduce this cost of acquisition, then you bring value to the insurance industry. That's what WeCover is doing with its infrastructure. So that's why I believe it's a success. And again, having won successes in front of very big names, very big incumbents, and scaling outside of their domestic market is a nice and first proof of success.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you highlight the blend, like the balance between the technical side and the insurance side, because you yourself have your educational background is a blend. You have a technical degree and a business degree, and I'm just wondering your thoughts on the importance of having both of those. You know, it's a little bit asked and answered, but kind of from that perspective.
No, but that's a real question, and I have to admit that I changed my mind on that, because at the very beginning of my journey in InsurTech, I was very or too much balanced, I would say, on the tech side. Again, considering that incumbents have a lack or a challenge on the tech side of the business, I said, okay, what we need to find is tech people, product people, and on the insurance side, we will find a way to deal with it. The reality is obviously a bit more balanced than that. And more, I think that we need to have the right balance. And I think it also has changed with the market conditions. That's also in the startup world more generally, not only in InsurTech, but in startups. Before it was all about the growth. Now it's more balanced, sustainable growth. So it's nice to sell a lot, but if your insurance portfolio is not profitable, it will not end well. And we even see startups that, let's say, get disconnected from their insurance carrier. So all of a sudden, they don't have anything more to sell. That's the end of the company. And this is very harsh. And even for companies that have big numbers, but they sold it not in the right way. And then the insurance company say, no, you cost me too much. You don't bring me revenues or margin. So I will stop the partnership. So that's really tough. And that's where it's really important to have also that understanding of how insurance works, to be sure that you sell your product in the right way. And obviously, technology helps you to be better than incumbent, or you try to be better than incumbents thanks to technology. But at the end of the journey, you need to have a proof that you have a sustainable growth. That's where it's coming from. And the second part, again, back to the slowness of the insurance market. If you have roots in insurance, you have a shortcut. Not sure why, but at least if you know who is taking the decision, if people have a feedback on you, hopefully a good feedback on you, then it accelerates things. And again, if you consider then that a standard sales process, specifically for B2B startup, but it works also for B2C, if you have 18, 24 months of sales process, if you can save 6 to 9 months, it's a lot of value for that. And again, having roots in insurance is really key. That could be helpful for a B2B startup, again, to go directly to the decision maker. It could be helpful as a broker to get insurance capacity, to better understand the mechanism, the process that you need to implement. And it's very interesting. Again, earlier I mentioned InsurTech 1.0, where we come at an end, I believe, of that first wave. And the second wave, we see a lot of startups that are looking for a chief risk officer, chief underwriting officer, chief insurance officer. I think it's related to that. They were built on product, tech, innovation, fast growing, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of them were probably lacking this second leg of the business, which is insurance related. And we see that pattern on the market, even for quite mature startup as well, strengthening that second leg. So they were very strong on the tech product side. Now they need to strengthen the insurance part. So that's why I have so many examples of startups that were too insurance and failed, or were too tech product and failed, that I believe that we need to have the right balance. And by the way, we have a few successful examples of people in that case that have the perfect match between, and the perfect balance between insurance and tech, that were very successful. So again, it's not because you have this balance that you will succeed, but let's say that you increase your chances of success having such a balance.
That is, yeah. I just have one last question for you. You regularly write and tweet about InsurTech, AI, startups, all of this. How important do you think it is for industry leaders to be engaging with the public, sharing your insights, talking about this stuff?
Yeah, I think it's really key. And I owe that to one of my previous manager at the very early days in my VC career. He said that when you are small or when you don't have money, you need to find the shortcuts again. And I think that being visible on social network is a shortcut in an industry. The VC space, it has changed in the VC space and in the insurance space, where not so many people are doing it. Again, when I started my Twitter account 13 years ago, there were not a lot of VC doing that, and I was new in that game. So that's why I said, okay, I need to have a shortcut. And even with Astoria, at the very beginning, nobody knew us. So we had to find a shortcut. Being visible online is a way to have a shortcut, because all of a sudden, you can share your views, being challenged too. So it's not only sharing our views, it's also to learn. So first, it's a shortcut to get visibility and show that you have something to say, and probably that's worth having a discussion with you. That's the first point. The second point is to share views, not only to say, okay, look, I know. It's not the point. The point is rather to be challenged. You share something and you expect the market to say, okay, look, this sounds interesting. On the other point, I would not agree. I would rather say X or Y. So that's a way also to fine-tune your understanding. And the third point, I believe, it's also support your companies by helping the market understand what's happening in InsurTech. Again, in the VC market, you have two kinds of players: horizontal players that are investing in any kind of technology, and vertical players which are investing in a specific industries. In our case, I would say InsurTech, Fintechs, I would put them together. But beyond InsurTech, Fintech players, insurance might sound very complicated for a lot of players. I believe it's part of our job to explain how it works. And again, especially in the current market, because there are two ways to look at it. First way is to say, okay, look, 5 InsurTech companies that went public in the last 3 years, it's a nightmare for them. So InsurTech sucks. I tend to believe it's a bit harsh as a conclusion, considering that it's a limited and very biased market. again, full stack players. That's most of these players, Lemonade, Root, Metromile, Hypo, they are full stack players. This is only 2% of every deal in Europe over the last 5 years. So if you consider that because 5 players in the UK are facing troubles, InsurTech sucks, I believe it's a mistake. And we try to explain that, but again, happy to be challenged there. But again, it's to put a bit of balance in the discussion, saying, look, yes, they are struggling, but the truth is that they are way more model than just this one. So that's a way also to explain, again, how the insurance work, the trends that we discussed before, the trends in InsurTech, and help, again, having, let's say, a balanced view on what's happening on the market. Something that we have always said is not every startup will succeed, for sure. So not every InsurTech startup is nice because it's InsurTech. We saw a few patterns like that in 2021, 2022. It's over now. But on the other hand, considering that nothing will change in insurance, it doesn't fly. Again, when we see insurance companies struggling to acquire new customers, when we see insurance companies talking about operation effectiveness, again, not to say cost reduction, when you hear that companies, incumbents are doing merger and acquisition, again, to, I believe, leverage their existing IT costs on a broader customer base, that's challenge for the insurance industry. So there is a lot to do, probably not only as the InsurTech 1.0 did, but that's where there are a few opportunities, and that's where we are investing a lot in technology for insurance companies, because we believe that there is still room for that. And again, if not everything was good in 2021, not everything sucks in 2023. Again, the reality is obviously a bit in between. That's what we try to share online. So long story short, being active online is really key. And I think it's part of our success at Astorya.vc, if I may speak about success already, because we gain visibility, because we, let's say, engage with other investors and other players on the market on what's hot versus what's just noise on the market. And obviously, it also helps fine-tune our views on opportunities in the market and learn from others that push content online.
Yeah, I think it also helps. I mean, on a personal level, like I've learned a lot from your Twitter. So I think it also helps people get engaged with the InsurTech sector and get them interested. Florian, I love the message of balance. I loved learning all about the InsurTech space. Thank you so much for this. It was really informative.
Thanks a lot.